You're listening to ArTEEtude, a podcast with artists created and produced by Detlef Schlich, a visual artist and ritual designer, living and loving in West Cork, and best known for his essay about the cause and effect of shamanism, art and digital culture. Working in the field of performance, photography, painting, sound, installations, and film, he will dive and discover with us and a weekly creative guest into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind.
This is Detlef Schlich, and today we dive into the unknown and unexpected ocean of the creative mind at Cape Clear together with Ed Harper. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
Ed is I was supposed to say sheep farmer. No, he is a goat farmer, and Ed is already living here since 40 years on this island, or maybe more. We will discover that in total, how he came over here in the first part, and as well how it is to survive on a place like this, especially as a blind person, because Ed is blind. Since when, we will discover now as well. I would say, like always, we have three parts, and we divided, and the third part is actually the part where we're gonna get aware how he came over to Ireland, and what was his creative inspiration, coming over to Ireland and setting up a farm, and especially when did it start and end, Yeah, Ed, great to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here. I've been here for whatever it is. It'll be 42 years this July. So, but I first came to the island in 1973, so that's a good bit before that too.
1973, first time, and you fell in love with the island, or
very much, yeah. And I mean going to what you said there about how I'm able to live here. The answer is I live here because there's the community. Although a lot of the time I don't see the community because I'm on the farm.
Yeah.
And especially under current conditions, and especially since my guide dog retired.
Yeah.
This year I've only been off the farm 4 times since February. So but I like living on the farm. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. So, it doesn't bother me too much. And oddly enough, with the effects of the virus, outside the island, I'm having a much more sociable time. I'm able to attend singing sessions in London, Dublin, and with one diverse one, which is kind of international and doesn't really have a physical home at all. And on top of that, it's politically, I mean, I was in a meeting in what would have been the meeting in Dublin, which I never would have gone to because it would have taken me 2 days. Whereas I could sit at home and take part in that meeting last night. And tomorrow I can take part in a vote as a delegate on the National Council of People Before Profit, which otherwise would have been a meeting in Dublin. And I probably wouldn't have gone. In fact, I certainly wouldn't have gone without a guide dog.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, there's a lot to be said for good old Zoom and the virus giving people a reason for using it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's perfect. Absolutely. I was wondering, actually, and I think it is. I mean, it is very special. You gave up everything in your early age. I mean, how old have you been? I mean, you had a job in England, wasn't it?
I was teaching for 8 years in England. I was teaching sociology mostly and general studies and
so critical theory.
Well, it's just a general sociology, O-level and A-level, sort of pre-university level. It was a relatively new subject. And in fact, whilst I was teaching, it became so popular that it exceeded English in the number of people taking it. And it led to a very interesting political spat with the examining boards because they deliberately downgraded the number of people that were passing.
Yeah.
Because it was becoming so popular, and oddly enough, the state weren't too keen on it, because whereas if you study Shakespeare, you can, if you're a reasonably intelligent person, apply a lot of the insights of Elizabethan politics to the present day, but it's not very straightforward. But if you study how society works, you do start, on the whole, to think about how society works and how it doesn't work, and you start to want to do things.
Yeah.
And because we suddenly became so popular, they literally downgraded. They raised the pass rate, dropped the number of students that were passing.
To keep the elite going.
Yeah, and we finished up having to go down to London, have a row with the chief examiner, and they backed down because they couldn't take the thought of the publicity.
Yeah.
But we're talking, that would have been early 1970s.
All right.
With the,
how old have you been there?
well, I was there 8 years. I was 30 when I left.
Okay, so you start with 22 already.
Yeah, so I must have started teaching when
teaching.
I was that
so
kind
you
of
finished
age.
quite early.
Yeah.
Your studying, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I finished. I went into the blind school system when I was a kid. I went to a blind primary school in Liverpool.
So you're blind from as if born?
Well, not strictly from birth, but as near as damn it. At 11 months old, I lost the sight of one eye with measles.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I get seriously annoyed with anti-vaxxers who really do not know what they're talking about when they say that measles is not a serious disease.
Yeah.
It's killing all over the world, and they're helping it. Yeah. But anyway, I won't get into that for the moment.
Okay, yeah, no.
But I lost the sight of one eye when I was 11 months old, and when I was 3.5, I stuck a pair of nail scissors into my other eye, and that kind of that finished it. But at least it was
by
me.
Accident or what? Or was it?
Yes, by accident. I didn't know how to use scissors, and I mean, it taught me a lesson which I've, on the whole, carried on to my children, which is, if you don't know how to use tools, you don't leave tools around unless you're going to teach people how to use them, because there's nothing more deadly than somebody trying to do something and not knowing how. And as I say, it cost me my sight. So but yeah, at least it was me and it wasn't somebody else. So
so you got to use living without daylight very early.
Yes and no. I mean, initially I could still see shadows and things once I got over the initial accident. But
like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Yeah, it's an interesting one too, because by the time I was 3.5, I'd obviously learned what all the colours were, because if you describe something as being red, I know what you mean. And
can you see a little bit of the red? Or
no, not at all.
Just black and white.
Nothing. Literally nothing.
All right.
But then people often follow that up with, so I suppose it must be strange living in darkness, but you don't live in darkness. Oddly enough, if you know it's daylight, it is, your imagination fills it in. Your brain abhors boredom. That's why people, if you put people in a situation of a sort of sensory deprivation, they have, essentially they have some kind of illusions will come to fill the space, because we're animals that are designed to be always alert, always looking for patterns, always looking for the predator and so on. We are prey animals, really, originally.
Yeah.
And so you don't just shut down. And so if I know it's daytime, as far as I'm concerned, it's light, but I can't see light.
All right.
And if I know it's nighttime, I know it's dark. And actually, from my point of view, in a practical sense, nighttime is actually a much more visible time to me by hearing.
Because it's so quiet.
It's quieter, and it's usually damp at night. And I presume sound travels better in damp air than it does in dry air, because
the smell is different as well, isn't it?
Oh, that's true. But I mean, like if I go out, on the road in Cape at night, I can actually hear, well, assuming there's no wind, of course, which is rare here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I mean, I can actually hear the verges and I can hear the walls. Whereas in the day, I probably wouldn't be able to do that, because there's so many other noises around.
Sure. I mean, I think this experience, how to describe this light for a blind person is, I think, very, very special. I mean, it is very creative, actually. So I think if you read or actually if you listen to books, you probably did you listen as well to books about light?
Well, I studied physics up to A level, but
Sure.
that's my main thing to do with
all
light.
right. yeah. So how did you approach this subject? I mean, it must be a very interesting discussions between you and the pupils, or
Well, the interesting. I mean, I was one of the first 3 totally blind people to actually do A level physics, which is in those days was the pre-university level.
yeah,
And I did it because I had a college that I went to, that a teacher there who was, I'm afraid by now will be long dead, but he was very enthusiastic about the whole idea, and he modified various instruments so we could use them.
yeah,
And he built various things so we could use them.
Yeah.
But what I found fascinating was, if you like, almost the philosophical side of it.
yeah,
That myself and my blind colleagues didn't have any particular difficulty in accepting that light behaved in a similar way, for instance, to radio waves.
yeah,
Why shouldn't it?
yeah,
But for the students who basically lived in a light world and used their sight all the time,
yeah,
they found it upsetting. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but they found it an emotional problem that light behaved in the same way as other waveforms, and you could actually guide it. Like very short wave radio, you can move around in polished waveguides the same way you can light.
yeah,
And it is interesting that it was an emotional problem for them. They were resistant to believing it was the same thing, and it's the same. I say it's almost a philosophical or a sociological thing.
yeah,
I mean, like I talk all the time in seeing metaphors, though I don't see it all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I say, I see what you mean, and I say you're right, because
Sure.
in this culture, sight is so much the primary sense.
I mean, because light is a primary sense,
Yeah, and the reason is because it carries more information, because it's very, very short wavelength, and so you can get more information. That's why we're on fiber optics communications nowadays, because you can shift a lot more information.
It
a lot
is
faster.
very, very interesting subject,
Yeah, but it's only a matter of degree. It's not a matter of difference, if you see what I mean. But the thing is, for those who have their sight, they're so primed in this culture particularly to rely on that side that they frequently ignore the other senses.
Sure.
And in fact, they're not aware of the fact they use them. And in some cases, I suspect they don't.
But but I mean, our society is sight driven because how many percent on this planet are blind? I don't know.
It's a very small number, fortunately. I mean, less in developed Western countries like this than you would find in India or Africa, because most of the infectious diseases we've now solved sufficiently that they're not common. But
vaccination.
yeah, but no, I mean it's a very interesting topic in a way. It is to me anyway, and because I work and live with animals.
Yeah.
And they have a different culture. I mean, that they if you're working with dogs, yes, particularly if you have a guide dog like I've had for 46 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you rely on that dog having a good sense of sight.
Yeah.
Because it has to live in a culture where all the other people it's dealing with work on sight. But the truth of the matter is that dog has a much better sense of smell than it does of sight. And that dog will use its sense of smell for you, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And so, it's very useful to work with an animal that has some areas of and dogs' hearing is on the whole way better than people's hearing, and that can be very useful too. I mean,
and they are specially trained for that as well.
The majority of the training of guide dogs is sight-based, because they're trained by people, and they're trained by people who live in a sight culture.
Sure.
But dogs naturally do it. I mean, as long as dogs aren't discouraged from doing it, dogs naturally do it. Now, to an extent, you have to discourage a dog from using its nose when it's working, because you don't want a dog sniffing along a pavement. You want a dog to walk up the middle of the pavement so you can get along fairly fast.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I would be amazed. Well, I'll give you an example. My first guide dog.
Yeah.
I suddenly discovered she had an additional facility that she was never trained to officially, which was if I was in a strange town and I was walking along the street, every so often she would behave like a pointer. She'd suddenly hesitate and point at a doorway, right? And I rapidly discovered that doorway would be a pub or a bar, because I found out, talking to the person who'd had her when she was a puppy, that totally against guide dog rules, they had taken it. Well, they'd taken her to the pub to socialise her, because guide dogs have to be able to cope with any kind of social situations. But totally against the rules, they'd bought her the odd bag of crisps. So as far as she was concerned, the smell of beer, or whatever the main smell of pubs is as far as the dog's concerned, was associated with bags of crisps. So we'd go along the street. She was a good dog. She worked for me well, so she wouldn't kind of rush into a pub. She'd just hesitate, point at the pub and say, "We going in?" And if you're in a strange town and you're a blind person, and if you drink or you need a cup of coffee, that's a fantastic facility. I mean, I'm not suggesting that they could incorporate that into all guide dog training, and some dogs would be hard to handle, and you couldn't stop them going. But yes, it's a very useful facility. And that's the dog's natural ability to scent things, but to an extent you have to limit that, because you have to get them to work in the kind of world we live in, or the kind of world you live in. I have to cope with that too.
Yeah, I mean, especially if, the point what you made. So we live in a visual world, So, I mean, which is as well subsequently somehow superficial as well,
Oh yeah, I mean, there are advantages to being blind, and one of those, as far as I can see, one of the biggest advantages, you're not subject to, because you all live in a very visual world, you don't suffer from all the visual advertising. You don't, literally, your head isn't stuffed with you're waiting at a bus stop and there's all this crap, basically, wanting you to buy this, that, and the other, and whatever. And I mean, having said that,
but if you're in a city, you're surrounded by advertisement
all the time, and
sound-wise,
Yeah, well, sound, you do suffer from the sound. I mean, you have no choice about that. But on the other hand, it's because the visual channels are the ones that most people use. They're the ones that most people clutter up with things they want to sell.
Yeah,
and it's nice not to have to be told you need to buy this car, that that shirt, and the other, I don't know, kind of sausage or something all the time. You don't have to not think about it deliberately.
No, absolutely no, and as well. I mean, what I read a book about. I forgot about the name of the author. Maybe you read it as well. It's about the entwined history of light and awareness.
No, I'm actually fairly illiterate, but
it is great, and it was a physician as well, and he mentioned that people who used to be blind, and they became their eyesight back, say after 20 or 30 years, after an operation or so, they get so depressed that some of them really committed suicide.
Well, yeah, I could believe it.
Yeah. and that's some of them, even if they could see everything, so they never ever switched the light on, so they really were so used to live in this dark moments. I mean that it's for seeing people, but if people like you have such an intense imagination, I think what you are doing is really unbelievable, and if you learn really to be so strong, you discover things where seeing people are dreaming of.
Well, I mean, there are practical advantages as well. I mean, I can work at night if I have a bad kidding at night, and I don't have to put lights on and upset the rest of the animals in the goat house. It's very handy if I do have somebody with me who can see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because from a distance, it's if you don't have to interfere with an animal, you leave her to herself, but you just keep an eye on what's happening. Now I can do that pretty well by sound and by smell, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to, if you have a difficult kidding, and you have to, put your hand inside the goat to sort out some kind of mix-up with kids and whatever else. I suspect it's a lot less disconcerting when you're first starting.
Yeah.
Not to be saying, but my God, I can't see what's in there.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to see what's in there. You work by touch all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot less worrying. I mean, that comes with experience, and anybody can learn to do it. In fact, people have learned to do it for thousands of years. But it's certainly, there are things. Working at night without lights is a definite advantage if you're working with animals and so on. So, yeah, I mean, it's not all a one-way street. It's not, and I don't know how to describe this. I would be the last person to say that there are no disadvantages to being blind. There are a lot.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have to, there are ways around everything if you look for them. And very often the simplest way around it is to ask somebody else who doesn't have that problem if you're living in a sighted culture.
Yeah. No, I mean it's very, very impressive. That's for sure. Ed, I think we're almost at the end of the first part. I keep it always around 20-25 minutes because the attention span of the listeners is very short. We're sitting, actually, I didn't mention that, we're sitting here actually in front of Ed's farm, and you see in the background already our ocean of creative minds. No, I'll just leave it. It's okay. And Andy, our cameraman, is sitting in the back. He just was asking me so if you should sort the camera, but it's fine. You can see this talk as well on YouTube a couple of days later. What I'm gonna do is as well, I put the Ed's description from his website and underneath my description as well. So if you want to get in contact with Ed or want to visit Ed here on his farm, you are probably more than welcome. Maybe you just tell the people the opening times, Ed. So I don't know.
Yeah, essentially, if we're here, we're open for visitors, but we are also part of the WOOF program, which is the Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So we take volunteers who work alongside us, and we teach what we know, basically. And at the moment, I did have somebody who was effectively, a friend, was very much a friend, but was also effectively an apprentice, and had got to the stage of knowing, I'd say, virtually everything I do. Hadn't put so many years in, only a tenth of the years, but on the other hand, she had somebody to teach. And sadly, for sort of personal reasons, she left. And if there is anybody out there who would be interested in a serious apprenticeship, there's no money.
A long time.
Yes, yeah. There's no money, but there is. There's food and lodging, and the benefit of almost 42 years worth of experience.
Yeah, and a beautiful place. I mean.
Yeah, but you have to be capable of wanting to live on an island. But if anybody's interested, if you're interested in coming, say, for at least 3 months, come for a month first, and then if you want to stay for 3. And then if you still want to stay after 3, well, then we can consider a really long term. But otherwise, if you're interested in doing that, at least let me know quickly and let me do it, because if I don't find such a person in the near future, I will probably wind up the business.
Yeah,
it's the only way to go, I think.
That will be sad.
Yeah, particularly it's difficult for a lot of people, even a lot of farmers, to understand, who have a different attitude to their animals to me. But this herd is a family, basically, and it works as a family. And if I drop dead tomorrow, the goats would, in fact, run their own lives. The only way I can farm is the way I have, which is you have to understand the people you work with, and that includes the furry ones. And you have to cooperate with them, and they have to cooperate with you. I would have no inclination to do it, but I couldn't go out with a big stick and try and terrorize them. So if you want to learn a different way, and if you want to also learn not to think that you should be interested in the maximum profit out of something, and that is not the be-all and end-all, because there's profits that don't exist in money. Happiness is one of the things.
Yeah,
Somebody was asking the other year, and my friend sadly who's left came out with a great statement. They said, what's the main product of the farm? And she said, happiness.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what the main product of the farm is. And for all of us, all of those involved in it. And yeah, money, we need money because we need to live, we need to buy food, we need to pay for power, all the usual things. But the truth of the matter is, what is the point in making profits when it comes down to it? What is, for their own sake? There's no point. What is money? If we could organise a power cut throughout the world, or at least all the banks, all the power would be pulled in all the banks, who would know who was rich and who was poor? Because it doesn't exist. The gold's gone, or the gold's there, but that's not what the money's based on. It's figures on a computer screen. But sadly, those figures do relate back to the real world, and the real world they relate back to is real people, real work, real animals, real production. And the turning into those figures is the way that a small group of greedy people accumulate that. And we choose to believe them and let them tell us that they own, effectively, us. And it's time we stopped.
Yeah. On this note, well said. Thank you very much for being my talk guest, and thank you very much for having me here on this beautiful place, because I came already yesterday ago, and it was quite a long journey from the morning coming away from church course up to here. I mean, it's airline, just maybe 10 kilometers or something like this. It's not very, very far away, but by bus and by ferry it takes ages. So I stay here already a couple of days more, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that as well, Ed. And I would say we see us in the second part. Take care, bye. This is a listener-supported show. I feel honored if you subscribe this show. You can follow me non-financial with a following click on one of my Instagram accounts, or subscribe the visual version of this podcast on YouTube via the link below. If you like what you hear, be sure to tune in this Sunday for the third part of this ArTEEtude audio triptych. If you want to leave a donation for a coffee or a bus ticket, just follow the donation link via the ArTEEtude podcast account. Eventually, I would like to thank, through this medium, all my members and listeners of the I Love West Cork Artists Network from all over the world. Just to remember myself that without you, this here couldn't and wouldn't happen.
You have listened to ArTEEtude, West Cork's first art, fashion and design podcast. ArTEEtude, never so close again. That was too close.